All right, welcome into the James Spearman Show. We've got another exciting guest for you today, Joseph Laruso, with Ramos Law. I see a lot of their ads, and they're helping a lot of people across the nation, honestly. So I'm really excited to sit down and ask questions. Obviously, if you're new to the show, what we do here is just sit down with airplane owners and people in aviation, kind of get their story. Because most people, what I've come to know is if they're involved in aviation, that's just a small piece of their life. And normally they've got a really unique and interesting story. So, Joseph, thank you so much for being here, taking the time to be on the show. And thank you.
Oh, James, thank you so much. It's an honor. Yeah, thank you very much.
Awesome, man. Well, let's get right into it. What got the first question I normally ask everyone is what got you into aviation? Because um, I know as well as anyone else, there's like that one moment that
Yeah.
sparked and that you can always go back to and be like, that was my moment. And then from there, you're watching every YouTube video or whatever. You're on aircraft or trade a plane or talking to everyone in aviation, and you're just like completely hooked. For mine, it
Yeah.
was when I was in middle school. My dad took me to an air show. What about you? What got you into aviation?
So super similar. My uncle was an air traffic controller. So he was part of that Reagan era of controllers. And he was the ground boss for the ramp, and it was a military air show in Colorado, and he was the ground boss. And there's a picture of him holding me up like this, and he's on the radio, and like he's got the 80s flow going, and he was just moving airplanes, moving helicopters, and moving jets, and that's my first memory of aviation. And then from there, nobody in my family flew, including him. He wasn't a pilot either. But I had this aviation bug, and my dad, who was a tax preparer, his partner was big in aviation and had a slew of Moody's and then a slew of Barons. And so my dad started pulling me out of class when I was super young to go fly with his partner, and we had to hide it from my mom because she was terrified of aviation. And that's how it developed, is my dad pulling me out of class and doing flight lessons. And then my dad got me a job at the airport, the private airport that was at the in our city in Fort Collins. And I was a lineman at 13, driving the fuel truck at 13. Only could be done at a privately owned airport. And started trading work hours for flight hours. Um, we finally told my mom after I soloed at 16. We told her that I had been flying the whole time, and she immediately started crying. So, but that's it. And I still remain the only person in my family to fly. So,
Man, that is awesome. And you're hooked from there, probably.
hooked. Yeah, everything about it. Literally everything about it. I'm trying very hard on my nephew and niece right now to get them hooked. So,
No, that's awesome. And you've got so many angles. I hope we try to or we can cover as many facets in aviation that you've come in contact with. But it's really exciting your background. Okay, so you um and it's kind of challenging for me to figure out where to go next. But so from there, it sounds like you've been in aviation business. You owned a flight school, right? Like
mhm.
where did and then now you're a lawyer. You've also worked with NASA. You've flown a lot of jets. Like where did it go next?
Yeah, uh, so I was flying all the way through high school, and then by the time I went to the Air Force Academy. By the time I went to the academy, I already had my commercial. And what's fun about that is at the time I owned a Citabria. I had a 69 7K cab, and I was competing in aerobatics at the time with the IAC chapter, the local IAC chapter, and I had to get a waiver from the academy to be able to leave base as a freshman to go and fly my airplane in competitions, not on behalf of the academy. As you know, like the academy competes as well, but they compete in gliding aerobatics. And so yeah, by that time I already had my commercial. I was already competing. Um, I left the academy in 2006. Had two spinal surgeries back to back within 90 days, and then after that, it was 2008. by the time I was, feeling ready to go again, and there were no jobs, and absolutely no jobs. And I had the CFI at the time, and everything had just crushed. Like that whole training industry just plummeted. And we thought, all right, what do we do about this? Let's start a flight school. So me and my buddies got together and said, it's got to pick up, right? Like we're through 2008, 2009. It's got to pick up. People are going to get money again. They're going to start training again. So we started a flight school. And from there, ran that flight school for about 5 years, and it was amazing. We were a Cirrus Flight Training Center. We flew a lot of diamonds. Go figure, back in the day, this is a funny story. Cirrus was none too thrilled with us as a Cirrus Flight Training Center because we were doing primary training in an SR-20. And they said that is not a primary airplane. You start in a Diamond or a Cessna or a Piper, and then you move to the Cirrus. Go figure how many years later, that was 2008, 2009. Now they tout the SR-20 as a primary training platform. But they were upset when we were doing it. So yeah, went through that. And then from there, had a couple of incidents where we had students that couldn't get a medical. We had a couple of crashes that happened at the school as well. And it just kind of hit me, we don't really have advocacy in our industry. We have a lot of risk, but we don't have a lot of advocacy. So left the flight school to go to law school, to be an aviation attorney. And then couldn't, my goal at the time was to be a full attorney, like that was it. 100% of my time would be behind a desk. Found I couldn't do that. And could not abandon flying. So I still maintain my professional piloting on the side, and I've worked through the jets and worked through the ratings on the side, while still now I'm the director of aviation here at Ramos Law. So helping
Man,
people nationwide.
yeah, that's awesome. I want to, yeah, you. So I've been in aviation since I was 14 or 15, right? And what you're saying is exactly right. And I deal with aircraft owners on a daily basis. I manage aircraft, I advise aircraft owners, I train people as a CFI and work on their planes too, right? So, and there's so many like really unhealthy, um, I would say, mindsets that aviation has centered around your medical and I would say also like any sort of interaction that comes with the FAA, where
Yeah.
owners just really don't know what to do, and there's not a lot of great advice that comes around, and people are scared to get treatment that they may actually really need. I was talking to a friend not that long ago, just to in a really brief nutshell, but he went through a divorce several years ago and, kind of went through a really bad spot and had to, was prescribed, some antidepressants once for like a short period of time. And he's, from his perspective, he can't ever be a pilot, which that's not true, right? So,
Yeah.
but that a lot of people believe that way, and the way that the rules are written, unfortunately, right now, they're from my perspective, being in the industry for a long time, like I think they're gray and they leave a lot of scrutiny on themselves. I think they bring a lot of scrutiny to themselves. So people
Oh,
need the help. I'm
yes.
so grateful that you're there. Heck, I had, which I'm not going to go into any details at all, but as being on social media and flying, somebody can file a complaint, right? So there's issues with stuff like that, and there's all these terms and lingo and what to do and how to handle that situation. And I'll have
Yeah.
some airplane owners where they're like, I'm going to get a lawyer immediately. And then others, you get other advices, just work with them. It'll be fine. Right. So,
Yeah.
and both of those can be true depending on the situation, but it's great to have somebody to go to, right, for that. Um,
Yeah, I appreciate that. In each of those cases, I mean, like I feel like, you know, every single case is exactly that, where, a pilot didn't know, or they weren't quite sure, or they didn't, and it's not that, 99.99% of our clients, there's not a deceptive bone in their body, right? They're not trying to hide stuff from the FAA. They're not trying to circumvent rules or regulations. They just literally do not know. And you're exactly right. Like the applications are written so poorly, the rules are so vague, that it is often all we're doing is cleaning up mistakes, and they're honest mistakes that pilots make or honest fears that pilots have. So it is, I was always worried that, you go into you hear about being a defense attorney, right? And you hear, your client's always guilty. That's not the case. I'm fortunate. Not the case in the piloting world, where they're very, very honest and respectful people, and everyone loves this industry to the core. That for them to say that they're purposely violating a reg is just, you might as well be stabbing a stake through their heart, right? Nobody wants to do that. They want to do the best. So it's incredibly rewarding to work with pilots that just need a little bit of help cleaning it up.
Yeah, the other thing too is the more people that you run into in the FISDOs, I'm sure there's bad eggs owners and operators, and there's probably some
Sure.
bad eggs at the FISDOs, but really almost all of them that I've come into contact with, they're good people too. They're trying,
Yes.
right? Like they're not trying to just roast somebody, and they've all shifted this mindset. The FAA's really tried to do a pivot on, hey, we're here to bust you, to no, we're here to be safe and compliant, right? So
Yeah.
I a lot of the people that I've ran into are really good people, and sometimes, their hands are tied because the rules are so poorly written. Like they're kind of both screwed on both sides,
Yeah.
um, and it really sucks. I was going to wait to get into this, but ultimately the change is going to come from legislation, right? So talk to me a
Yeah.
little bit. I know you're working on a couple of bills you're trying to bring so you can bring change. Talk to me a
Yeah.
little bit
So
about those.
I'm fortunate in that I'm on the board of directors for the Pilot Mental Health Campaign, and I've been on the board since the beginning. And our head of certificate defense at Ramos Law Aviation is an amazing attorney by the name of Zeke Dennison, and Zeke is also on the board as well at PMHC, and myself. Zeke and another fantastic aviation attorney here that we have, Matt Bulow. We went out to DC last week because we introduced two bills to the House, and so happy about that. One is the Aviation Medication Transparency Act that basically requires the FAA to publish their list of all meds, right? Green light or red light on these meds. We were talking before. I have pilots that have refused after a surgery, that have refused pain meds, sitting there in bed because they don't know whether they're allowed to take it or not, and they know they're going to have to report it, so they just don't do it. I've had pilots that have questioned anesthesiologists about the medication that takes them under for surgeries, diabetes, heart medications, you name it, anything prescribed. Pilots will. One, they'll usually stay away from it, or two, they'll hit the internet like crazy and hit message boards trying to see, all right, who's used it, right? Has anybody asked the FAA if you can have permission to use this or not? So this act is simply publish your list, right? Let pilots know so they can give it to their medical providers and say, hey, this is what the FAA says I can and cannot take. Can you please find something within that realm? Um, Pretty basic stuff, right? It's like a one-page bill. The other one is the Mental Health in Aviation Act, and this is following the ARC. So the ARC, a year ago, 2024, April 1, I wish they chose a better date to come out the recommendations, but on April Fool's Day of 2024, they dropped, I believe it was 25 or 24 recommendations to the FAA about modernizing their regulations with particular focus on mental health. Just like you were saying, there's pilots that like steer away from getting medical treatment. Well, we find the number one cause, or the number one realm of medicine where pilots do not seek attention, is mental health. The loss of a loved one, right? Like to go get grief counseling for like 30 days on how to deal with losing a loved one. Well, that's reportable to the FAA. And right now that gets you deferred. And the deferral wait time for them just to review documents is 9 to 15 months. So by going and seeing a doc for 30 days after the loss of a loved one, you could be benched or sidelined for a year or more, right?
That's
It's
insane. That
crazy.
is so crazy.
It's crazy, and that's because the mental health regs are tied to the DSM-3, which was last effective in a clinical setting in 1987. It's just, it doesn't make any sense. So what this act calls for is a revitalization, revamping, modernization of those regs. And essentially what it boils down to is, hey, the ARC gave you all these recommendations, told you how to do it, FAA. This act requires you to do it. You have to follow through with the ARC. So both those bills got announced last week or the week before. They hit the House floor. They got introduced. We're hoping they push through the House, hoping we can get them through the Senate, get them attached to something, and get them law.
Dude, that's freaking amazing. What you guys are doing, because these are two like really toxic. I'll just be honest; they're really
Yeah,
toxic subjects, and it creates toxic behavior. Because just think about like what you just described, grief
yeah,
counseling, right? Like you just lost someone and you need to talk to someone. You actually need the help, and
yeah,
we're not talking about anything anything crazy. And that essentially the way the rules are set up is no, just keep it to yourself. Which one's more dangerous? Do you think? You know,
yeah. And
the
what's
help that you
nuts
need
is,
for 30 days, or yeah, just
yeah,
keep it
it's
to
just nuts.
yourself.
People have said to me, they're like, well, just go get it and don't tell the FAA. Well, that ties all the way back to what I said earlier about, this is like, this is more than a job. This is more than a hobby. Aviation is somebody's true identity. Like this is like, that joke of, how do you know pilots in the room? They're going to tell you. That's real because that's who they are through and all the way through the core. They are a pilot and they love talking about aviation and they love being a pilot. Um, and so to say to them, hey, all you got to do is just like don't tell the FAA. That's a clear violation of regulations, and it's a clear violation of the 8500-8. And not only is it a violation that's punishable by a civil penalty and jail time, but it also kind of weakens the entire industry, right? Where everybody's just lying. So what do pilots do? They don't get help. The majority of pilots just don't get help, and they say that's easier. Then I don't have anything to hide, and I have nothing to report until it
Yeah,
pops up.
and the reality is, I mean, you and I probably, well, I still fly for the Air Force, so definitely that is in question. But really,
Yeah,
it's not the Air Force National Guard is not my current, main source of income, right?
sure.
Aircraft maintenance business is. So, like you and I, it doesn't really impact. Who we're talking about is people that rely on flying for their whole entire income, right?
Yeah,
An airline pilot,
yeah,
and they're probably have a stay-at-home mom, kids, and then all the unhealthy airline pilot spending habit patterns. No, I'm
yeah,
kidding. I'm
yeah,
kidding. I'm leaving that around. I'm kidding. But anyways, they rely on that income, right? So it's like, well, are you willing to gamble your entire income, right? Like 1 year without a pay? What? Not
yeah,
like most people. Nobody can do that,
yeah.
unless you're coming up on retirement. And so it's not it's essentially life or death, and so it's really scary. And I'm so grateful that you're doing that. And I've definitely what you're saying is not crazy. Like I've heard this my whole career. It's like you've got your real doc and then you've got your flight doc. You don't
Yes,
tell the flight doc anything.
yes.
So it's which is just insane.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it
The other
really
one,
is.
the funny thing is the Air Force flight physicals extremely intense, right? Like
Yeah,
especially the initial one, and that one only applies to a third class medical. When I can go get a second class medical, and they let me read a chart off the wall, ask me a few questions, check my blood pressure, a handful of other things, and I walk out and get a second class or first class.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, especially the mental health, man, too. That one really is. It hits home because I've had so many people near and dear to me that went through a divorce, or they had somebody
yeah,
pass away nearby. Um, and I've been affected there too, where something's going on, and I probably should have got the help that I needed, and I didn't because I was scared to have a deferral on something. So
yeah. It's just it's no way to be safe, right? And I've fought that stigma. I feel like I've been fighting this whole issue for a decade now, but and only now banging the drum is actually we're starting to get listeners. But I just feel like I've always fought the stigma of, well, we want our pilots to be superhuman. They shouldn't have depression. They shouldn't have grief. They shouldn't have anxiety. They shouldn't. And my response to that is always, okay, so they're human though, right? Like they are human beings, right? And everybody, COVID was, I hate to say this, but a blessing for our industry because COVID brought to light all the mental health and took away the stigma, and people are talking about it. And it's like every other industry could suffer mental health effects of COVID, except for pilots. They don't have that, right? So it just doesn't make sense at all. It never did make sense to me, and I'm so happy that now we're able to humanize pilots and improve safety by two bills that are letting pilots go see therapists, go see doctors to make sure that they are in the best mental space and headspace possible for the safety of flight. So,
Yeah. That's awesome, man. You're doing some awesome work. I was gonna wait to get in that, but that's just like such. I really wanted to talk about that. What's the first thing? What would you recommend? Obviously, they want to call you, but what's the first thing you recommend when if somebody gets a letter in the mail or they're wondering about what they should take or what they shouldn't? What would you tell that person in the moment that's scared about their entire income, right?
yeah, the big thing, I mean, not to be that salesman, but the big thing is to call and not to be the salesman. I'll say call any aviation attorney, call AOPA, call anybody, because it's not as simple. And the FAA unfortunately works in form letters that they fill in gaps in there. And that form letter may not totally apply to the fact pattern that's there. It just is a form letter. And we know from experience, and any aviation attorney will know from experience, that that form letter is about to follow this one, is about to follow this one, is about to follow this one, if you follow what the form letters are requesting. So any good aviation attorney can look at that first letter and say, all right, you got four that are going to follow. So in order to shut that timeline down, we're going to give the FAA everything they need right now in anticipation of those letters. So instead of a 4-year benching period, you're down to 9 months, right? Um, it really is. People look at those letters and go, oh, all I got to do is give them A, B, C, and D, and they're going to be ready to roll. And that is just simply not the case. That may solve that letter's problem, but that doesn't solve every problem. So.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that. They've got this process and this whole glossary of terms and what mean, what's this and what's that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we're pilots helping pilots, so it's not a big deal. There are times where we look at letters and say, you don't need attorney representation right now. All they're asking for is this and this, and that is going to be the final letter. So just go ahead and comply with it. And then there are other times that we look at it and go, thank God you call us, right? Let's start working.
So yeah, I think you're totally right, and it's good to have an idea of where you're at in the situation. So um, I want to pivot away from that because there's a lot to get to with you, and I don't want to. I want to be respectful of your time, but dude, I've been going to Sun and Fun Oshkosh every year since I was a kid. It's always been super cool watching the airshow pilots do what they do. And talk to me what it's like to be an airshow performer and how'd you even. You talked to me a little bit how you got started, but what does that process look like?
So yeah, it's been crazy. So I went the Warbird route. I think there's two different versions of air showing. There's like the guys that go crazy in the extras and the edges and the game birds and the pits and then there's like the air show guys that are more kind of like the I don't know, fluidity of flight, right? They're not like tumbling an airplane to the max. So I went the Warbird route, and it started in 2012. We went and picked up a Stearman, and literally picked it up, took it off of a farm field in Kansas, and the first thing we did with it was took it to the Lake of the Ozarks Air Show. So the second practice day was the first time I had done a loop in the airplane. Um, so I kind of just like jumped into it, and then from there we just started getting calls for air shows, and then you start getting air show buddies that are like, if this guy gets a call in a T6, he's bringing the T6, the Mustang, the Beech 18, and the Stearman with him, right? And so then you just like get plugged into these Warbird groups. And at the time here, BJC was the number 3 airport in the nation for warbirds. We had the number 3 highest concentration of warbirds. And so, a call to any one of us for an air show was like a call to like 17 pilots. So it just kind of snowballed from there, and it became super, super cool. So, but then COVID crushed it. Haven't really had anything. Like, honestly, we've had statics after that, but we are trying to see now. We're starting to see like air shows coming back. So I've had 2 cities reach out to us here recently to try and get some warbird acts. So I'm really looking forward to bouncing back again and getting back in there. So obviously you have to have the airplane, and the airplane needs to be checked and inspected, right? Like it's important to note that if, as an airshow pilot, you're basically inviting a ramp check, right? Like every single air show is a ramp check of your airplane, rightly so. It's a ramp check of you, your certificates, and your airplane to make sure that you're good to go. And then, obviously, if you're doing anything inverted, they're checking parachutes and making sure that's all good. If you're doing anything in a formation, they got to check your fast card, make sure your fast card's up to date. That's your formation training card. And then, if you're doing low-level stuff, you got to get your low-level certification and recertification every year. So there's a lot that goes into it. There's also like for a while I was air showing with a buddy who had a Provost Mark V, a Jet Provost Mark V, and I was spotting for him. And you got to have an LOA for bank angle, right? In order to exceed 90 degrees of bank angle. So it's there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of regulations. There's a lot of checks. But the nice part is, I'll echo what you said about the FAA, is the FSDO is just shout out to the Denver FSDO. They are so nice and they're so accommodating and they're so willing. If you just go to them and say, what do I do? Map it out. That they'll say, all right, we need an LOA for this. We need an LOA for this. You need to get this. You need to get checked out on this. We've even had like the Denver FSDO here say, hey, if you can get 3 Spearmans together or 3 like speed aircraft together, we'll do a fast card off of those. Like we'll come out and do it. Really accommodating. I think they want to see aviation bounce back as well and air shows bounce back.
So okay, so you've got the hoops to jump through the FAA, and then also the community has like their own guides too, right? Like they want to see a bunch of hoops that you have to jump through for them as well.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
depending on the
100%.
air show.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you have a bunch of, the international group. We're trying to break that up a little bit. That may be, I don't know if that gets said here or not, but but you have the core body, right? And then the core body has a bunch of regulations that you got to go through as well, and recommendations that you have to go through as well. And then that follows all the way down to like individual core sets of air shows as well. So you could be fully certified and still have to like struggle to get a show because you have like each show has like we have so many warbird acts, we have so many extra acts, we have so many tumbling acts, we have so many and so it's crazy to break through the industry when you have the overarching governing body, you have the FAA, and then you have each individual like air show sect that you have to try and like get into. It's crazy. So we're fortunate. I think the warbird route was the best way to go, simply because I think ours is a little bit easier because a lot of people enjoy seeing the warbirds. Air shows like having them. They're good at static display. They show well. So we're more on the come to our air show side of the house instead of actually like campaigning, right? So.
Yeah. And then there's like this convention once a year, right? And that's how they farm out all the acts. Talk to me about that.
Correct. Yeah, that's the overarching. So that's what we're trying to break up. Not break up. Break up's the wrong word, but trying to make it so more focalized into states, right? So each state has a division of it. But yeah, that's a big convention. It's definitely a big convention, and there's a break off to that too. You also have like NWOC. NWOC's a big deal as well. The National Warbird Operators, and they kind of work hand in hand with that. So yeah, there's a lot.
So how do they? What is it? I've never been to one, but the Air Force has. My Air Force base in Knoxville's had a few air shows, and they send a team out to the big convention, right, and just get a taste out of it. I haven't got a chance to go there, but is it what's it actually like? Is it like they bid on what performers are going to which act, and they've got a list of acts? Kind of here's some stupid questions for you.
Yeah, and I've never been there either. And that's the best part about this is that we have like our division in NWOC, and then we have like representatives that go out. And that's what I was talking about with like hey, if you call this guy, this T6 guy who's a performer, he knows the shows, they reach out to him and they say, hey man, can you come do this? That's where all of a sudden, yeah, I'll show up, but I got a T-28, I got a Stearman, and then you like kind of slide through a little bit on that back door. So
Okay, that makes sense.
yeah. Yeah, I've never had to go either. But we do find that it's the reason why it'd be nice to have a state like division of it is because you do have the whole goal is that you don't overlap shows, right? So that Chicago is not the same time as Pensacola, so that Oshkosh is not the same time as Sun and Fun if you go really big, right? So that's the whole goal is that you make shows available so that people can actually have a career, right? So people can campaign and move airplanes, and there's enough time to move airplanes between shows and stuff like that. And then you can set your season schedule and post your season schedule, and it's viable. But you're talking about big shows that happen at the convention, right? Like Chicago, like Oshkosh, like Dallas, stuff like that. It's all really, really big shows. But then you're missing like the small community shows, like the small farm field shows. You're missing fly-ins that have air show components to it. You're missing charity events that have air show components to it. Those are not really considered. And so you'll often see, like, for example, Colorado last season, there were 3 shows on the exact same weekend. So we had to like split the warbirds, try and hit all the shows. And like, by the time you're hitting all the shows, you end up as a static at one, right? You don't get to fly. So it would really, really be nice to break that down into states while keeping the big convention still hitting the main show schedule and tour. So
What's your act look like? I need to catch it at some point.
there's some YouTubes. I know there's some on Laruso Legal, the old law firm that my then wife and I had. So we have a couple. So we have one that's super fun, except for unfortunately when airplanes collide, which happened here recently in Dallas a couple years back. But we have one that's just simply we call it race tracking. So you stagger airplanes for airspeed, and then you run like the most that we've ran is I think 16 airplanes in the air at the same time, and then you have like an inside track that are running like Stearmans or bird dogs or something like that. Then you step out to like T6s and a Beech 18 will usually sit together, and then you can step out to T28s, and then you can step out to the jet line. And then those have to exist all on the same racetrack running around each other. And the goal is to always have something in front of the audience at any given time. Also have a 2-ship act with another Stearman 450 as well. And that one, again, is more of just like general passing, general loops, general rolls. But unfortunately, like with the Stearman, especially at altitude here, at density altitude, the airplane really doesn't have a whole lot in it. 450 is helpful. Like a 220 probably couldn't air show. But, basic, it'll do loops, it'll do rolls, it'll do a Cuban, it'll do a hammerhead. I'm terrified to spin it. I won't spin it. There are guys that spin a 450. There's one guy in Colorado that'll spin a 450, and he's an amazing pilot. Gary Rohr, sponsored by Wheeling. It's just basic aerobatics. So you could consider it as like a sportsman or primary, like mostly sportsman kind of primary.
Man. Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I've seen the total act. I didn't realize that was the one that you were talking about initially, but yeah, that is awesome. I haven't seen that one live, but I've definitely seen it through the years in passing. So
Racetrack is wild.
yeah.
It's a lot. And I won't do it without running like we'll run a spotter up front, and then everybody will run a spotter. And so at an air show, you have to, in order to put another airport person in your airplane, they have to be essential crew and they have to be checked off by the FAA. And everybody will run a spotter, and they'll run a spotter as essential crew.
So yeah, it's always been my dream one of these days to be one of the acts at one of the major air shows, but it's definitely a process and it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, the council is nuts. Like I don't know. That's why I never got into like the actual like I had dreams back in the day when I bought this at Tapria. I had dreams of like next thing I'm getting an Edge, and then I'm going into that, and there's just no way. Those guys that maintain the full currency of low levels and fast, and and all that stuff, and that like legitimately air show for a career, that's unreal. The amount of campaigning and shit that they have to do with the council.
No, it's I you mentioned that when you do the air show, it's like the open invitation to ramp check your airplane.
Hmm.
One of the air shows we had here at Tennessee, at McGee Tyson, we actually had the Aeroshell team come out and do a
Oh,
performance,
the P16? Yeah.
and one of them got sent home. They went down the line and ramp checked every plane, and one of them had I think the AD, I can't remember exactly what the AD was, but it was just outside of one of their hour requirements on the AD, and they're go home, bye. And we're just like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, that's why it's also nice to do the big group with the warbirds, because you kind of you kind of live in a herd, right? So you're a little bit protected with the FAA going down the line and the warbirds, and then a lot of times the FAA doesn't want to send home a warbird guy. So
I think they sent that T6 home and made him get a ferry permit on the way out. It was ground.
that's rough. Yeah, that's rough. Yeah, it's crazy. It's a cool community, but it's definitely a lot of eyes on. I don't think the public realizes the amount of stuff that goes into that. So
Yeah. Cool. Talk to me. So shifting gears again, and there's a lot, but I want to hit the highlight on what you do at NASA.
sure. So that was crazy. So yeah, in 2018, I got to fly on NASA's Camp 2X campaign, and I was flying a Lear 35. So what's crazy about that is right before there's a contractor here out of Colorado called Spec, and Spec is a company that builds atmospheric probes, and these probes get hung on, you name it, NOAA's airplanes, NASA's airplanes, um, different countries, weather stuff all over Saudi, UAE, China. These probes are all over the world, and they measure ice and water at a like beyond molecular level. So Spec had a Lear 35 that was hard pointed, and we ran probes on the tips, we ran probes on the hard point, and then we ran a belly bag with probes as well, and then probes up on the tail. Um, and right before I had just gotten my Lear type rating, and I was flying a Lear 55, and I had just gotten my SOE removed. So I was maybe, SOE is 25 hours. So I was maybe like 27, 28 hours. Like we're talking baby Learjet pilot. And this airplane was set to go overseas for Camp 2X, and their right seater backed out. And the airplane was at BJC, and they had a huge scramble, and they said, "Can anybody find an insurable Lear pilot?" And this person needs to be able to be gone for the next 60 days. And so it went down the row of Lear drivers and eventually came to me, and they said, "Would you do it?" And I said, "Yeah, if I can get insured." And no joke, the insurance came through that morning. I called my then wife and I was like, "Bring out my gear. I'm gone for 60 days. I'm going to take this Lear around the world." She brought out a bag, and I left that afternoon for Goose Bay, Canada, and then just kept going east. So gone for 60 days, went all the way around BJC to BJC, all the way around the world. Um, we had an intermittent deployment in the UAE, where we worked with their government on seeding stuff, where we would follow the Lear through, like a King Air would go to penetrate a storm cell, and it would pop its seed flares, and then we would come over and intercept it over top in the Lear, and then we would ingest the seed material as well as the atmospheric conditions to see if it was actively changing the molecular level of the water molecules in the cloud, to see if seeding was effective in that part of the world. And then from there, we were based out of the Philippines, out of Clark Air Base, and we flew off of NASA's P3. And so we would essentially, like, it was almost like having like an aircraft carrier, like the P3 would do 10-0 missions, and it would circle convective cells. At the time, we had a bunch of tsunamis that were popping up, and it would circle convective cells, and then cells that they would find interesting that were starting to build and tower. We'd set off of them in formation, and then they would say, "All right, send the Lear to that cell," and then we would break off, and we would go fly through that weather, penetrate those storm cells, get a bunch of data of the storms building in the South Pacific, and then if we had enough gas, we'd come back to the P3. If we didn't have enough gas, we'd go to Clark, and then they fast turned us on gas, and we'd get back up there on the P3, and they'd send us into another storm cell. So it was crazy. It was absolutely nuts.
Yeah, a lot of people will never get the opportunity to do something like that. That is incredible. Well, at least in circumnavigating the globe, I mean, at least it wasn't in like a 172, right? So,
No, yeah, no, no. Instead, a 1979 Lear. So, um, yeah, it's very cool. It's cool to be, we're with a full team of scientists, right? So the P3 is all they're they were backed with a bunch of science racks. They were dropping sondes, they were doing experiments, and then we were backed with two techs in the back as well that were monitoring all of our instruments. And what was unbelievably cool about Cam 2X is we had timed this pass where the space station had come over top, and the space station was shooting LiDAR. And then the P3 went above us, and then we stacked below the P3. I think that's right. We stacked below the P3, and then below us was NASA's vessel, the Sally Ride, a boat. So the boat was dropping sondes, and then we were shooting down, and then the P3 was shooting down and up, and then the space station was shooting down, and we essentially bisected the atmosphere going all the way down to the ocean on one split second. It was crazy.
yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, it was cool. It was pretty interesting timing. There's people much smarter than me.
What's the longest mission you did in that plane?
So the Lear, it was days that were long for us. So we were only, at most, we could put on 3 hours of gas, 2.5 hours of gas. The P3 would do 10-hour missions. So we would yo-yo off of the P3, like, get gas, back to the P3, get gas. And so our days were 10-0 days, but, we had maybe 2 or 3 sorties within the 10-0 period of the P3. So,
Yeah, that's almost worse. And
yeah.
deployments in the tanker, we can essentially fly indefinitely if we're not giving gas to anyone. So I mean, like 8 9 hour sorties, but it's almost harder to land and then like shut everything down, turn everything back on, take back off, get back up to the area, rather than
Oh,
go to an
yeah.
area and keep going.
Especially in the South Pacific, because they were we'd land, jump out, and you're covered in sweat,
Yeah.
and so we're chugging Gatorade and trying to eat a sandwich, and they're piping air conditioning through the jet and trying to cool it down as they're putting gas on, as they're re-icing, and then we're back up again. It's exhausting.
I know
So.
the feeling.
Yeah, yeah, you know it all too well. Yeah, and
Yeah.
we ran that. That was 2018. That was 60 some days that we went all the way around, and then after that, still continued to fly for spec, and we would do a bunch of kind of in the country deployments. Where, like for example, we went down to Houston 2 summers ago, and all we did was try and catch pretty high convection, and just ram the jet through it, right? Like get convection and thunderstorms, ram the jet through it, and then we circled tried to pick up convection out in the Gulf, hoping to hit a hurricane, but we never hit a hurricane on that one. So just got convection. So pretty crazy.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, um, I want to be respectful of your time, but the last thing here, shift gears just one last time, is talk to me about Ramos Law. You've talked to me a little bit about it and how you got going as a lawyer, attorney. It sounds like you and your wife were working together in the beginning on it too. How did Ramos Law get going?
Yeah, so fun fact about Ramos Law is the owner, Joe Ramos. He's a doctor and an attorney, but he's also a pilot. and he is a very accomplished pilot. He flies a lot. Like he has got to be the most proficient PC-12 driver in the nation. I mean, he is very, very good. And at that time, my then wife and I, Caitlin, we had the law firm, and that law firm was Laruso and Laruso, and all we were doing was certificate defense. And then Caitlin did transactions. She was a tax attorney, so she was doing aircraft transactions and tax advising. And eventually, our paths crossed with Dr. Ramos through his flying, and he said, what about joining forces? And so that happened 3 years ago. We came over to Ramos Law, and the nice thing about it is we got to build the division up. It's hard when there's just two of you, but it's a little bit better when you have the backing of a full firm to step up a division to really support the industry. So we did that. We have a full now under the aviation umbrella of Ramos Law's aviation division. We have certificate defense. The certificate defense, we do mostly pilot medicals, and we do that from Puerto Rico to Alaska, helping pilots daily. And we have two attorneys in that division. And then, of course, I step in and help as well. And then we have case managers, paralegals that all follow within that umbrella. And then over on the other side of the house, we do crash litigation. And so the crash litigation we do nationwide as well. And the crash litigation side is essentially filling the void of the NTSB, right? We work with a bunch of individuals, bunch of experts from metallurgists to autopilot specialists to weather people to atmospheric experts to piloting experts. And we basically, anytime there's a crash and we get retained, we have a team of experts that we bring in on the crash and then try and figure out what happened. Unfortunately, as you will know, the NTSB, fantastic people that work there, really, really enjoy them, but they're under budgeted and understaffed and overworked, right? Especially this year, they're overworked like crazy. So a lot of the accidents don't get the attention, don't get the type of due diligence, the type of focus, I guess is the better word, right? If you got DCA, they're going to get a bunch of money, right? The DCA crash, unbelievably tragic crash, and that may take away some funding for a Bonanza that went down in Kentucky, right, or something like that. So it's awesome to be able to bring out these teams of experts to fill the void and to kind of tip the hat at the NTSB and say, we'll do it, we'll figure it out. And a lot of times we'll share information back and forth with the NTSB and say, hey, we didn't find anything that's caseworthy. There's no liability or culpability, but here's what we did find. If that helps improve the industry or improve safety in some aspects. So yeah, two different divisions, and we are constantly growing. So coming up with new things. We just came up with a 8500 MedExpress simulator that's on our website. So you can fill out an 8500 as if you're filling it out for the FAA. You can do the full MedExpress as if you're filling it out for the FAA. But instead of that, it goes to an attorney, and you have attorney-client confidentiality, and we can turn around to you and say, all right, here's your problem areas. Boom, 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 and boom. So.
Dude, that is awesome. I'm going to write that down because I've got a bunch of customers that come to me for whatever, the mechanic, right? The A&P. They're like, hey, man, should I fill out my medical? I was like, I don't know. I have no clue.
Yeah, and we always tell them, this is a chance to fill it out accurately, right? Like if you have questions, this is how you fill it
out. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. You said that's on Ramos Law's website?
Yep, the 8500 simulator. So you can literally, you can type in everything. It looks exactly like the MedExpress. You can run through it, and we can tell you all your problem areas and help you through it. So, and even if you don't use us, like we can still tell you your problem areas. Like, hey, you need an attorney for this, or you need a doctor for this. And yeah, that should have been reported. No, that doesn't need to be reported.
That's incredible. I'm definitely going to be sending out to customers and anyone, all the people that come to me as the A&P and ask me my advice on their medical.
For sure.
I think it's also too pretty cool what you say about what the work that you're doing with the NTSB. 1 year I had actually in my second year of business, it was second or third, but anyways, some pilot from Florida flew up in like some Rockwell Commander or something. and he buries it into the side of this hangar that I'm sitting in, the cabin actually fit right between the two hangars,
Oh,
which is crazy. So he actually survived. The wings hit both hangars and it absorbed the full blow, and the cabin just like perfectly centered itself
oh
directly
my
between the two
God.
hangars. There's like normally like a dead space between the two hangars, any two hangars, I guess.
Yeah.
And he poor decisions, but ran the aircraft out of gas, so there was no gas in the plane, so it
Oh
didn't catch on fire. So they miraculously walked away. Well, it put me in a really really hard spot. Didn't have insurance. The guy didn't have insurance either,
yeah.
and so I get a call from the NTSB, and they're like, "Hey, we want you to investigate this airplane." I was like, "What? How?"
That's awesome.
No,
Yeah.
I was no, I was sitting there. I was like, "This is the most." There's zero chance I can give you an unbiased, you know,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
investigation on
That's,
this. This dude has shut me down for 2 months and almost, ended me.
oh my gosh.
I can't
Oh,
even
that's so
believe
crazy.
that you're even asking me to do this.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, it would have been great to been able to call y'all and be like, "Hey man, should I just tell them no?"
Right. Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. They reach out for any help that they can get. It's nuts. That's crazy that he's not insured. Two seconds on that. Um, this entire industry in the crash litigation side, we either see non-insurance or we see very woefully underinsured. This like I don't know what it is, but aircraft owners, and I'm guilty of this as well back, way back when I started, is you look for the cheapest insurance possible, right? Without realizing that this is not the same as cars, right? It's very rare that somebody's just going to have like a hurt spine as a result of an aircraft crash, right? Like you're dealing with more of a possibility of somebody legitimately passing away and dealing with their family. And if you don't have enough money to cover that, that's a problem.
Yeah, and it really, this is a whole nother. We didn't even touch on that, but a whole nother toxic area is people. They just think it's not a big deal, and I'm sure there's probably a whole bunch of hate comments that would come out on people. They just think, oh, we can't afford to. It'll cost an arm and a leg to actually insure the airplane, so they'll just do
Yeah,
the liability, right? What
yeah. And
what are
the
your
famous
thoughts on that?
policy, and I'm sure you've seen this a lot too. The famous policy is the 100,000 million, right? And that gets sold as $1 million policy. You got $1 million of coverage. Okay, but like, do you? Because it's 100,000 per seat. So if you're talking about Cessna 172, and they say, all right, you got 100,000 per seat, middle million total aggregate. Well, in that case, you only have 4 seats in a 172. That's a $400,000 policy. That's not $1 million policy, and it's a per seat limit. So you're talking about 100,000 per seat. Now, if you knock on wood, if something happens and you crash, what family is going to say 100,000 for the loss of my loved one? Thanks very much, right? And go, there's no way. It's not enough coverage. And what's crazy about that, I could tell you a pretty crazy war story. We once represented a case where we fought the $100,000 limit, tried to open up the $1 million limit, were unsuccessful. The policy language is what the policy language is, freedom of contract. We ended up getting 100,000 for the spouse of a gentleman who passed away. However, the airplane crashed in a field that was providing alfalfa to the Kentucky Derby. And that farmer brought a property claim under the $1 million portion, and he got over 700,000. So in an aircraft that crashed and killed people, the occupants got 100K, but the farm owner who lost alfalfa got almost 1 million.
Yeah, I could go on and on. I just because a lot of people come by and stop by and pick the mechanic's brain, but there's a ton of people that just think that's a super smart idea, where they're like, oh, and they just say it all nonchalant, right? Like, oh, we can't really. This thing it'd be crazy to actually insure this thing, so we just took out the liability.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Yeah, we are a very woefully insured industry, and as you know, for whatever reason, there's a lot of money in aviation, but there's a lot of being frugal in aviation, and I bet you see it a ton on the maintenance side of, oh, you can't defer that. Do we really need to do it this annual?
Yeah, it's all the time, and at, at some point you shouldn't do it, right? Like
Yeah.
just sell this thing, okay? It's gonna be like this every year,
Yes.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Just stop. And one I, that one kind of hits home for me because I do get asked that all the time. And I actually,
Yes.
my best friend died in a helicopter crash. He was ferrying a helicopter for a friend that was just under liability because it was a unique helicopter, right?
Oh my God.
And crashed, and his wife got zero, and um,
So sad.
yeah, and I think, and the reason why I'm kind of doubling down on this just a little bit because again, I'm talking to my customers out there trying to be a well-rounded resource for you. The short-sightedness of cutting the corners on insured is just makes no sense. If you put the plane down, what talk to me about what happens if somebody is insured like that and puts this thing down in a neighborhood
Yeah. I mean,
and
you've
it
opened
affects
yourself
multiple
up.
homes?
Yeah, you've opened yourself up, right? I mean, there's attorneys out there that are, I mean, they're going to attach anything they can, right? They're going to garnish bank accounts. They're going to hit homes. They're going to hit cars, right? Like, it's not that they're going to look at it and go, oh, it wasn't insured. All right, well, that's the end of it. That's not how it works, right? It's, oh, it wasn't insured. Okay, well, what do you got, right? Like, turn out your pockets.
Yeah, yeah, and um, I it again, it's crazy to think about, but when I was learning to be a mechanic, every decision that I was taught to make, right? You want to look at it through the lens of not necessarily the FAA or whatever, but if you're making a decision or if you think like, okay, is this a gray area or is this anything like that? What you really need to think through is how would I explain this decision to a jury of my peers
Yes,
that know nothing about
yes,
airplanes? Say it like you would to them. And then if you think somebody that has no clue about airplanes would feel good about it, then yeah, it's probably good. If not, you shouldn't do it.
yeah,
Um, Pilots, the same saying is there too. It's just a little bit different, right? The accident report. What is the accident report going to read?
yeah,
And then recite that to yourself once, and then think about is should I still take off? Right? Like
yeah,
I hear people with a twin engine airplane, right? And that one of the magnetos is bad. They're like, well, that twin engine airplane, it's got it's got four magnetos, no big deal. And it's like, well,
yep,
why don't you run the accident report once through your head at the lineup? Like
yeah.
pilot took off with a known mechanical failure.
Yes, and I see that all the time. I can tell you on the litigation side of the house, when people say, well, they defer a maintenance event, right? Like this part's getting old, or this is kind of timing out, or this needs to be inspected, and they turn to their mechanic and they go, do I really need to do that now? Like, why do I have to put money in that right now? And the mechanic goes, well, yeah, I mean, your aircraft is still airworthy right now, but like, should you extend? I wouldn't. And of course, there's that relationship where the pilots go back and forth, and finally, the mechanics do it right, where they say, hey, your aircraft is legally airworthy. I would replace this part. Um, and an aircraft owner goes, I'm not going to do that. That's extra money on an annual. I promise you, if something goes wrong, aviation attorneys will look at, okay, so maybe it was legally airworthy, but was it reasonable not to do that mechanic that extra maintenance work? Was it reasonable to tell the mechanic you didn't want to spend another 2,000? What's a life worth, right? Because it's going to come back to that reasonable person standard. And yeah, you can say, well, it wasn't required at that time. Yeah, but was it reasonable? Right? So something to consider. I see that all the time, and it bothers me. I just don't understand why there's so much money in aviation, yet so much of people being frugal when it comes to maintenance of their aircraft, and not wanting to update things and not wanting to listen to mechanics. And it feels like the annual is just always a bumping heads. I can tell you, when we had our flight school, it was if a mechanic says this is getting replaced, it's getting replaced. There's nothing, there's no argument back and forth. It's all right, then that way you're liability protected, right? Like mechanic said need to be done, it got done. That's it. So So yeah, definitely, there's a lot of those legal lessons that I've learned through a decade of doing this that I hope people listen to. I hope people understand. Trust your mechanics. Listen to your mechanics. If they tell you to do something that you should probably do it, just go do it now, and then make sure you insure your airplane appropriately.
Yeah, please God, get the insurance on your
Get the insurance.
it's but yeah, and from my side, the mechanic side, I really try to sit down when I send an estimate, which again, my documentation for the estimate is there's a list of discrepancies and there's off to the right side, there's approve or reject.
Yes.
And
Yep.
they either approve, I'll explain each one, and they either approve it or they reject it, and then I make them sign at the end. And so part of that is good up front to just being transparent with the customer, right? Like they have a
Yeah.
choice over what they want to do. I'm not just holding them ransom, right?
Right.
Uh, but also, so if something were to happen, I've got, he rejected it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what you
so,
hold up in front of in a deposition, right? Why'd you check no?
yep.
So,
So, well, man,
right.
this has been an amazing episode. I feel like I keep going, especially on those. We hit you hit home with me on a lot of areas that are real near and dear to me. And if I assume you're pushing really hard to grow what y'all are doing out there. What's the best way if somebody wanted to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so ramoslaw.com, and then we're on Ramos Law Aviations on every platform. I don't even know them all. TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. We got a bunch of stuff out there. And then, of course, just rolled out last month, like I said, the 8500 MedExpress simulator. So go get attorney-client privilege on your MedExpress before you have to give it to the FAA.
Yeah, that one is worth it. That's also worth worth the money to do, even if it costs something. Do it. So, hey, Joseph, and this has been an awesome one of my better episodes. Super unique story that you have, and I really appreciate your time with me. Again, thank you for being on the show, and anyone listening, watching, stay tuned for the next episode. I'm trying to get the most unique people in aviation on this episode. If you know anyone, reach out. Or if you'd like to be on the show, reach out. Otherwise, subscribe and stay tuned for the next episode. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.